Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, they're America's biggest oil company, committed, they claim, to tackling the climate emergency. But tonight, this programme can reveal undercover footage of one of ExxonMobil's top Washington lobbyists speaking candidly about his efforts to undermine new legislation to protect the environment. The lobbyist was captured on camera by the environmental group Greenpeace UK, boasting of how ExxonMobil has fought climate science and operated behind closed doors to water down green legislation. ExxonMobil dispute the claims and accuse Greenpeace of waging a campaign against them. In the first part of a series of reports on the secretive world of fossil fuel lobbying, our chief correspondent Alex Thompson has this exclusive story.
Last month, in a European capital, Unearthed, Greenpeace UK's investigations unit, is making the final preparations, wiring up with covert recording devices. On K Street, Washington, D.C., home of America's most powerful lobbyists, Keith McCoy, a key representative of the biggest oil company in America, is waiting for the call. The timing's vital. What may be America's greatest chance to combat the climate crisis is going through Congress right now. The video connection is set up. It's time to go to work.
Hi, good to see you.
How are you?
Moments later, Mr. McCoy will become one of the first ever executives to claim that ExxonMobil has aggressively fought climate science using front organizations to maximize shareholder profit.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes. Did we join some of these shadow groups to work against some of the early efforts? Yes, that's true. But there's nothing illegal about that. You know, we were looking out for our investments. We were looking out for our shareholders.
In response, Exxon said, "We've supported climate science for decades," and accused Greenpeace of waging a multi-decade campaign against them and the industry. Keith McCoy thinks he's being headhunted for a new job. In fact, of course, he's being covertly filmed. So tonight, a man boasting at a job interview, or a never-seen-before look at how big oil tries to manipulate big power, or both? First, the targets. Congressmen are fish. Exxon is the fisherman.
When you have an opportunity to talk to a member of Congress, you know, I liken it to fishing, right? You know, you have bait, you throw that bait out, you know, it's all these opportunities that you use, and to use the fishing analogy again, just to kind of reel them in, because they're a captive audience. They know they need you, and I need them.
Senators pressed to do Exxon's bidding behind closed doors.
You want to be able to go to the chief, and so that the chief knows you, that you can go to the chief and say, look, we've got this issue. We need Congressman so-and-so to be able to either introduce this bill, we need him to make a floor statement, we need him to send a letter, you name it, we've asked for everything.
So who are the fish?
I'm Joe Manchin. I approve this act because
The biggest catch, according to Mr. Coy, it's the conservative Democrat Senator Joe Manchin, who famously shot President Obama's cap-and-trade climate bill.
And I'll take dead aim at the cap-and-trade bill.
Joe Manchin, I talk to his office every week. He is the kingmaker, and he's not shy about sort of staking his claim early and completely changing the debate.
Legal declarations show that Senator Manchin has received tens of thousands of dollars from ExxonMobil and its trade associations. Keith McCoy names 10 other senators as crucial to ExxonMobil. Senators Mark Kelly, Chris Coons, Shelley Moore Capito, Kirsten Sinema, John Tester, Maggie Hassan, John Barrasso, Steve Daines, John Cornyn, and Marco Rubio. All bar Kelly and Hassan have taken money from Exxon totaling $117,000. We gave all these senators a chance to respond. None did so. Exxon insists our lobbying efforts are fully compliant with all laws and are publicly disclosed on a quarterly basis. Nonetheless, a degree of secrecy appears to be key. The last thing Exxon seems to want is open accountability, facing Congress in public.
We don't want it to be us to have these conversations, especially in a hearing. It's getting our associations to step in and have those conversations and answer those tough questions and be for lack of a better term, the whipping boy for some of these members of Congress.
So he says they hide behind trade bodies to avoid public scrutiny on the Hill.
Our CEO was invited to a hearing from a member of Congress who we know is just going to rip him to shreds when he goes there. The main thing that they're looking at is just to get ExxonMobil in front of a congressional hearing so they can rip us apart.
Big oil, big power, big pressure. The route from the K Street lobbyist offices to Capitol Hill is very well trodden. From the street to the Hill, we can now reveal the current ExxonMobil battleground and strategy.
It's big, yes. It's bold, yes. And we can get it done.
Just last week, as America continues to suffer heat waves described as apocalyptic and linked to the current climate crisis, President Biden fought to get Congress to pass his $2 trillion showpiece law, linking jobs and infrastructure to massive spending to combat climate change. On Capitol Hill, though, Exxon was also fighting to strip out spending on climate. Forget that, it lobbied. Stick to roads and bridges.
So that's a completely different conversation. When you start to stick to roads and bridges, and instead of a $2 trillion bill, it's an $800 billion bill. If you lower that threshold, you stick to highways and bridges, then a lot of the negative stuff starts to come out. Why would you put in something on emissions reductions on climate change to oil refineries in a highway bill? So, and people say, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So then you get to the germaneness and say that shouldn't be in this bill.
Sure enough, last week Biden's behemoth bill evaporated. A new law may be agreed, but major green initiatives are gone. Coincidence? Or the big oil effect? Nothing illegal, just oiling the wheels of power. Exxon said our discussions on the bill are not accurately portrayed. Our lobbying efforts are related to a tax burden that could disadvantage US businesses.
Plans capture CO2.
Recent academic studies show what Keith McCoy alleges is the wider Exxon strategy. Say one thing in public, do another in private. For example, it says publicly it supports a carbon tax. Keith McCoy says privately that's just PR.
Nobody is going to propose a tax on all Americans. And the cynical side of me says, yeah, we kind of know that, but it gives us a talking point that we can say, well, what is ExxonMobil for? Well, we're for a carbon tax.
And why? Because they're confident it'll never happen in America.
No, it's not going to. Carbon tax isn't going to happen. And the bottom line is it's going to take political courage, political will in order to get something done. And that doesn't exist in politics. It just doesn't.
Exxon told us for more than a decade it's supported an economy-wide price on CO2 emissions.
We're working on ways to provide energy while addressing the risks of climate change.
Take electric cars. It's all about doubt and delay.
You're not going to be able to just switch to battery-operated vehicles or wind for your electricity. And just having that conversation around why that's not possible in the next 10 years is critically important to the work that we do.
But science is screaming at us that we do not have 10 years. Delay, doubt, deflect, the classic hallmarks of modern-day climate crisis denial. And ExxonMobil's alleged involvement in that is thus revealed from the inside tonight, straight from the horse's mouth.
Well, earlier I spoke to the climate scientist Michael Mann and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a Democrat from Rhode Island. And I started by asking Senator Whitehouse whether this really is how lobbying works.
Yes, and I think if you go back and look at the history of climate denial and climate obstruction, you'll see that in the US Senate, climate change legislation was a bipartisan thing until January of 2010, when the Supreme Court let unlimited money pour into politics, and Exxon and the rest of the fossil fuel industry took advantage of that to completely shut down bipartisanship on climate change.
I mean, is Exxon and other groups like it as influential as this, though? I mean, or is this a man boasting?
No. They can be very, very effective through front groups that screen out that it's ExxonMobil. So they can remain very effective while being anonymous. And that's the danger here, is that the public doesn't see who is pulling the strings, yet the strings kept being pulled. It's like having keys on a piano. They can play whichever front group they want in chords, in sequence, as they see fit.
Let me just bring in Professor Mann. ExxonMobil say themselves they work with third parties to advocate for policies that are important to the industry. They exercise their right to engage in lobbying in the United States. If they're not breaking the law, what's the problem?
Yeah, there are no profits on a dead planet. So first and foremost, they have a responsibility to make sure that we don't destroy this planet for future generations.
But I mean, I guess what they're arguing is that they have a duty to their shareholders, and that's to make money.
You know, but there's also a fiduciary responsibility here as well, isn't there? They have a responsibility to their shareholders not to undermine their, the planet that they live on.
But does targeting big oil and big politics take away the responsibility of individuals who need to make individual decisions about the way they live their lives, the cars they drive, the way they heat their homes and cool their homes? Because that's really what's going to change the world.
When you put this on people, and everything about the people that they're getting is market signals that are false, fake science, front groups that are phony, it's hard to put that on an individual when you haven't cleaned up the environment where the individual is getting the real news and the real facts of the matter. And you've got these enormous, very powerful fossil fuel companies that are creating a masquerade of reality. And it's putting a lot on an individual to try to figure out that that's not real.
Is there any of this lobbying activity you'd like to make illegal?
I think the important thing, and what we're fighting hard to do right now in the Senate, is to make it transparent. I think the American people can figure it out if at the end of this sleazy smear advertisement, the company has to say, we're ExxonMobil and we approve this message. Instead, they come up with, we're Americans for peace and puppies and prosperity. They put some phony front group out, and the American citizen, the American voter, is denied the most basic information to understand who's doing what in the political environment that they're supposed to police as voters.
Michael Mann, I mean, what else would you like to see change?
We need to level the playing field so that renewable energy, which isn't destroying the planet, can compete fairly. And to do that, we need policies. Executive policies by this current administration are making a difference, but we're going to need climate legislation. And as Sheldon laid out, that's going to be a challenge, but it's essential. We need legislation that will codify the changes that are already being promoted by this administration.
And Senator, one of the striking things this lobbyist admitted on camera was also that they use industry groups to take the whipping for them, so that they don't have to put up the CEOs before people like you to face questions. That's something we encounter in the media as well.
Yes.
I mean, is there any way to stop that?
With accountability on the company, the CEO owns it. And they can't get away with the situation they're doing right now, where you get a CEO who has a line of talk about climate change and a policy about climate change that they then go to their trade associations and ask them to do the exact opposite, to knock down the very types of policies that they claim to support. That kind of double dealing, I think, would be exposed very quickly, and I think that would put an end to it.
Senator, thank you very much indeed. I know you've got to go, so we don't want to take up more of your time. But Michael Mann, I mean, give us a sense of sort of personally for you, what being the focus of this kind of money and power is like. How crushing is it?
Well, Yeah, it's not the life that I thought I signed up for when I double majored in applied math and physics at UC Berkeley. Suddenly, I found myself in a world that no scientist is prepared for, where you're not dealing with the good faith back and take and criticism that takes place in science and is essential to the scientific process, but instead you're subject to character assassination efforts. You're vilified on the pages of the Wall Street Journal and other conservative outlets. You are brought into hostile hearings by fossil fuel funded politicians. You experience threats against your life, against your family. That's not the life that I thought I signed up for, but it was the net effect of the attacks funded by the fossil fuel industry directed at scientists like me to try to discredit us and to try to prevent other scientists from coming forward and speaking out about the nature of the threat we face.
Professor Mann, Senator Whitehouse, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.